This is the Effective Engineering Manager podcast. In today's episode, Adam and Slava start to talk about the topic of managing up and how not to communicate work issues.
Welcome to the Effective Engineering Manager podcast.
Hello, Slava. It's your time today. What would you like to talk about?
Today we are starting a series on managing up. Today I would like to talk about how not to communicate work issues. We are going to define what complaining is, how complaining is ineffective. In the end, we will provide a checklist that our listeners can use to see if their abort communications are in the complaining territory.
So we're not just going to complain about complaining today, right? There's actually a lot more meat on the bone to this particular topic. So Slava, to you, why is communicating up an important part of managing up?
Communicating up is important because our bosses know what is happening based on what we tell them. And effective communications get things done by enabling our boss making decisions.
So I think in terms of communicating up, I think you've really hit the essence of what we're going to get into with complaining. Because at the end of the day, especially as a manager, or a leader of some kind, when you have to communicate to your boss, or you're in the position to vent or complain, it has to go hand in hand with effective how you communicate up, with effective skills for talking to your boss or your boss's boss or whatever the situation is, because you don't want to leave that complaining session with kind of your head in your hands and thinking, oh my gosh, my boss really didn't care about me complaining, and maybe I was complaining too much and all that kind of stuff. So I think tying the complaining to how we communicate up, and this is also true of individual contributors that are communicating to their boss. I think there's an effective way of doing this, and like you said, it gets tied to getting things done. So let's dive in. What is complaining, if we can give it a definition?
Yes, and the crisp definition of complaining that I've come up with is this: bringing up issues to your boss without offering solutions and without asking for resources or approval. And the issues the way they're brought up, or the kinds of issues that folks bring up, and I did for sure too. I'll give examples. It can be expressing unhappiness about the product, the people, processes, or tools, or usually wanting things to be better than they are, or wanting things to be different than they are. And I can give a few examples. Complaints usually arrive in the form of a simple, sometimes even single statement. And complaints can be direct, such as, I'll give an example. Hey boss, I believe that the other team is approaching change management the wrong way. They should be doing it that way. Or they can be a bit subtle and hiding behind just informing you boss. And for example, hey boss, I'd like to bring to your attention that the project is getting late. Period. And that's how complaining is defined, and these are the couple of examples.
I think that's a crisp definition, and it's a good working one. As a manager, and both of us, I think, share this, we get enough complaints from our directs and peers, and it's a regular thing. So I think this is a really important and meaningful topic because, as you mentioned, complaints do usually come in the form of a simple statement, but then they kind of devolve into something a little bit more, right? It becomes just a gripe session, which is, I think, something we don't want. And I think that kind of hinges on why complaining sometimes becomes ineffective. So let's dive into that. How would you describe the effectiveness of complaining, and why complaining, by your definition, is ineffective?
Yes, complaining is ineffective because it takes the work off your plate and puts the work on your boss's plate. And it doesn't bring results because your boss's plate is already full. And even if your boss puts your work on his plate, they're going to drown. And usually experienced bosses don't do this. So whatever you're complaining about is not going to get done. And not to mention that taking your work off your plate violates the basic management principle of pushing the work down.
And I think that's really the line here between effectiveness and ineffectiveness. When your complaint is substantial enough without thought for solutions, where you're asking your boss to do something, right? And it really transcends all the way back to when we were the beginning of our career, right? We've talked about this in other podcasts that early on in a career, an engineer or employee direct needs more structure. And more structure means being told what to do and asking when they have problems, right? So it's a feedback and a very direct feedback loop. Like, you do this, I can't do this because, or I don't know how to do this because, right? And that happens early on in your career. So if now, later on in your career, you're a manager or you have directs or whatever, and you're either complaining or hearing complaints of the same form, what you're seeing is not a lot of growth and certainly not a lot of effectiveness. So in the end, it sounds like all communicating up about issues without proposing solutions is really complaining. Is that right? Are there any other exceptions to the rule that you can come up with?
Of course, the common sense need to be applied. There are quite a few situations when bringing up issues is not complaining. In fact, you have to. And number one is bringing up what is must know for your boss. This is not complaining, and it's very easy to check if it's something that is must know for your boss. If your boss will get in trouble with their boss for not knowing, it's a must know. And I'll give a few examples. Number one, reports of unethical behavior, reports of violations of company policies and anti-harassment laws, emergencies such as production issues, or retention issues such as resignations. So as you can see, there can be quite a wide array of issues which you have to bring up, and you don't have to bring solutions. You just need to report up as soon as possible, right? And this is not complaining, because it's a must know for your boss. So even in situations like this, if something which is must know for your boss, it can be and will be more effective if you provide as much detail as possible. How did you learn about the issue? What is the current status of the issue? Who's on point handling it? And this will help your boss to acquire situational awareness much faster than just reporting that there is a problem. So also another thing which is not complaints is escalations per our escalation model that we just shared recently in our previous podcast on escalations or professional escalations or effective escalations. And because when you escalate to your boss, you already, per model, you already did your best to demonstrably make things work between you and your partners, and it just didn't work. And now you have a request for help for your boss.
I certainly think that when you must knows are for sure, right? You almost have an obligation to get your boss in the loop as soon as possible, especially when there's like retention issues where it can be very timely. You need to capture that information, and I think it's okay, and even in those cases, to tell your boss, say, hey, here's a situation that's come up. So and so is planning on resigning or is resigned. I'm working on a possible plan to retain them, but just wanted to let you know, right? And I think you touched on it in the last point you just made, where the information that you share with your boss are going to be things that allow he or she to help you or make a decision at their level, right? If you're fully empowered to make certain decisions, you need to be, especially as a manager, an effective manager, you need to go and make those decisions and stand by them and justify them yourself. You don't need your boss to tell you how to do that. But you have to also remember your boss is always going to have a different perspective. They have a different level of responsibility. And sometimes your sphere is going to intersect with theirs, or they may need to provide additional information to support what you're trying to do. So, for example, you mentioned production issues. A production issue can come up. Certainly if your team is technically responsible for it and you're on top of it, that's great. But your boss might be in a position where he has to report more globally across the organization about what's going on and impact to different business verticals that you may not necessarily be involved in. And so for those reasons alone, you have to get your boss involved, and you have to know their interest in being involved in that, right? It's not just a book report where you're giving them information. You're providing them meaningful information so that in their context, they have the value add, and they can use that information to do something that you're not empowered to do. So we discuss complaining here as a way of communicating up. But what do we do when we as managers are on the receiving end of complaining?
Good question. And there are two parts that effective managers can do when they are on the receiving end of complaining. And the part number one is, now that you are in this situation when your direct report or your partner, horizontal, diagonal, is complaining to you, it's extremely important. Do not shut down the conversation. Listen carefully, attentively, maybe sometimes enjoy the active listening and tell them back what they told you. And this is important because it builds trust. Your ability to listen when people have something to say is extremely important, and people will always remember that you are the one that can listen. Now, that's the first part, and this is a minimum that we all can do. The second part is actually on complaining the situation. And what I would recommend our listeners to do is to ask this question. Well, first of all, thank them for bringing the issue up with you, and ask this. Can you give yourself some time to think and come back to me with a plan that I can look at, a plan that you and your partners could execute, and I could help you with resources or with an approval. And that plan would address the issue. So, and this is the second part switches the conversation from I have a problem, I have expressed it to you, to hey, I hear you, would you like to work on it? And it gives this attempt to, what happens to this attempt to give or put work on your plate, you are effectively, professionally, and most likely with something that is going to bring good result, give it back to them, right? You ask them to think about it more, think about a plan, and come back to you.
And I think that's the real key to this. And I think what you mentioned there is the key to why this is an important issue to discuss. Because we all have employees that vent and complain. We as managers often complain. But I think when you tie it with that second step where you come up with a plan, either you come up with a plan and you bring that to your boss, or if someone's coming to you and complaining to help with uncomplaining, you reinforce them by asking them to come back with a plan. It's like asking them how serious they are about it. And I think that is so important because it really trains, somewhat indirectly, your directs on how to really think about why they're complaining in the first place, right? There's the emotional part of complaining, and then there's the kind of the tactical, strategic part of why it's a complaint in the first place. And I think by bringing them together, it really helps you. I know personally when I've told people on my team that have complained about something to go back and maybe think about it or come back with a plan or here's some things to think about, they either don't complain anymore about that, right? Which is not always a good thing because you want to make sure you're not just like stifling. But sometimes they do come back, and you know at that point it's a serious enough issue where they've thought about it and said, here's what I can do. And actually that shows me a lot of maturity. So it's this part of this manager and direct relationship that I think really allows you to kind of provide that level of perspective in helping to do uncomplaining. So I think what you mentioned here is a super important area, and having that second part of coming back with a plan is really, really critical. So, Slava, we've talked a little bit about what complaining is. We've talked about some needs when situations when complaining really does necessitate escalating to your boss or sharing information or really mentioning it in the first place. And we've talked about how to uncomplain. Can you give our listeners a checklist that they can use to know what they are about to complain about to their bosses and how to go about it effectively?
Sure, here it is. You know that you're about to start complaining to your boss about issues that you care about but don't have a plan. Is this. You want to talk to your boss, that it is bothering you. You are coming to your boss's to the conversation with your boss without offering a plan that you and your partners would like to execute. Second, you're coming into the conversation without asking for resources, or you're coming to the conversation without asking for an approval from your boss.
Well, thank you, Slava. As usual, this is a great topic and good stuff.
Always, more good stuff is coming. And our next episode on managing up will focus on communicating issues up in a way that brings results.